This should just drag on and on. I believe everybody's time is as valuable as go out to eat or whatever it is we want to do. So I have an alarm set on my phone right here. It's going to go off at 8:11, and we're going to wrap it up at that time. The actual time that this class is supposed to meet is on the last Monday of every month. So the next one would be on March the 30th. We, of course, because of the weather last week, couldn't do it last week, so we're going to go ahead and do it this week because we want to get in as many as we can during the legislative session. So at any rate, to begin our class tonight, in regards to legislation and in regards to everybody being here, I would just simply like to say this. You probably know, if you've looked at my webpage, that one of my motto pieces of legislation or of an Oklahoma law is a quote that comes from the Open Records Act. It says that the people are our most sacred rights, being that we have this inherent, almost like you might say, an inalienable right, like we find in the Declaration of Independence, to know the things that are going on with our government. And so I'm really happy, and I ask you, by the way, if you have a smartphone, you can get it out and follow along with the legislation. But I'm really happy in this day and age where we can live and where we can just look up on our computer, either your computer at home or your smartphone, you can look up any piece of Oklahoma legislation you want, and you can research it, and you can find out about it, and as a free citizen of this country, you can do something about it. I kind of feel sorry for people in the past, and I kind of wonder, how did they ever know anything about their government, before the internet? I mean, you'd have to go to a big library, you'd have to open things up, you'd have to research, that's the old way of doing research. People that wrote research papers were oftentimes in the same boat, they actually had to go and research it, and it made it a very difficult thing. But now we can know on the internet. And I think that's why a lot of people are more interested now than they used to be in their government, is simply because we can know, can't we? It's not like there's no opportunity for us to know. We can go to the internet and we can know, and therefore people want to know. And definitely our opinions are going to differ some in this particular class. I'm not going to pretend that we're going to agree on everything, and we don't have to agree. That's one thing I should say right now. We don't have to agree on everything because this isn't the convention from last month, right? We don't have to say it has to be this way or we're doing it this way for sure. Everybody can walk away. We can still disagree, and we can all still be friends. There's no need for anybody to get upset about anything or to, just to be upset by the things that we say. Personally, I want our government to be as what I call economically conservative as possible. And I simply mean by that things that tend to either take money away from one group and give it to another, or things that tend to prop up what you might call cronyism. Certain people in the upper, the cliques, if you will. I like to look at legislation and say the kind of legislation I'm interested in is legislation that levels the playing field for everybody. Now, that's not necessarily everything I'm interested in, but from my point of view, that's kind of how I'm going to come from it, is from the point of view, less government is better. And if there's a reason for more government, then certainly we can bring that out. Let me talk about real quick, and by the way, this is a discussion, and I put on there that I'm the discussion leader, because I do want you to give me your opinions on the bills that we're going to look at, on the things that we're going to talk about. So, I don't want to be just like a teacher. I want to just be a leader of the discussion. But we have to have rules, only a couple of rules, just simply because there's only two things I can think of that people really get ultimately passionate about. One of them is religion, and the other one is politics. I have been in the heat of both of those in my life. I actually had a couple of public debates, public religious debates in my life, and some formal written debates. So I'm not a stranger to that disagreement that exists in religion. But we know that as many religions as there are opinions, and that's why there are all these different religious groups. And politics is going to be the same way. People get hot when you talk about politics. And so one of the rules I want us to have is, no matter what the issue may be, let's just realize we don't have to agree on it tonight. Like I said, this is not the convention. I've got my views, you've got your views, and such. but it's not like we absolutely have to agree on anything when we walk away from the meeting this evening. So let's just be friendly. If we say something you don't agree with, fine. You can throw your idea in there, and we want to hear everybody's opinion. Two things real quick in regards to the purpose of this particular legislative review. People have wanted to know, well, what is the purpose of this legislative review? Well, I'll say that really the purpose of it primarily is to simply let people know. And it's education, which is really kind of saying the same thing. People understand, I think, in this day and age that knowledge is power, right? You got the knowledge, you got the power. I like to think of the idea of if you've got 6 guys out in the field that are going to go work, and there's 5 shovels and 1 backhoe, and you're the only one that knows anything about the backhoe, guess who's got the power? You do. Isn't that right? I mean, if you're the only one that knows how to use that machine, all those other guys are going to be using a shovel all day. And so we understand then that when we know about our government, when we come to understand the things that happen, then we can take control of it. Then we can make better decisions and let our voice be known in regards to the things that are important to us. So knowledge is power. That's the main reason I want to have this class, because I believe there are a sufficient number of people that really want to know about the legislation that goes on in Oklahoma City. So that's the main purpose. The second purpose would be simply action. I hope if some of this stuff we talk about, it lights a fire underneath you, that you'll contact your legislator, or you'll do whatever else you want to do, maybe write a letter, maybe pursue some other bill you're interested in. Whatever it is, that's what I want this class to do, is just to involve more people in the legislative process. Okay, so anything anybody would like to add at this point? No, we haven't said a whole lot yet, but okay, let me say one more thing about the purpose of this. The purpose of this meeting is not to call names, okay? Now, what I mean by that is the purpose of this is not to bash somebody, to make somebody look bad, or what have you. It's not that at all. Unfortunately, it is the case that legislation is tied to a legislator. And there's no way we can make that go away, right? So if we're looking at a piece of legislation that we either like or don't like, we're going to have to come to the realization that there was somebody behind it that's driving it. It's a real human being. And so sometimes it is necessary to get at the person, and when I say get at, I mean to understand who the person is, so that we can do whatever we want to do to either uphold the legislation or to try to head it off. It's attached to a person. So on the one hand, we're not here to call names and hurt people and that kind of thing. But on the other hand, legislation is tied to either a representative or a senator, and sometimes we have to know who that person is. I am very, very sensitive to the idea that our legislators are real people. They take out their wallet and they have real pictures of their grandkids there too. Okay? They have real pictures of their grandkids, their loved ones, and they do the same things we do at home. They have the same feelings we do. So I'm sensitive to that, and I do want to be respectful. And if I'm not, certainly call me out on it, because I don't want to be that way at all. I just want to get at the legislation and look at things that are important, I think anyway, as conservatives. All right. Are we okay so far? All right. Now, before we get into a bill, I would like to talk about, in regards to legislation, I would like to talk about the idea of a bill being authored. It may not occur to you, but have you ever thought, it never really, I guess, dawned on me until one point in my life when I thought, you know what? Legislation actually has an author behind it. That is, like I said, a real human being that writes it down. And of course, we know who it is that does it in this particular case. It's either the senator, it's either the senator, or it's the representative. And now they may not actually, write out the words, and they may have a professional that knows how to write it. I don't deny any of that. But basically, the representative or the senator, they are the author of the bill. And so being that they are the author of the bill, you have to ask now, why would, say this senator, why would he author this bill, whatever bill it is you're looking at? Why would he do it? I mean, was he just sitting around in his living room, you know, contemplating the deeper things of life, and he comes up with some certain bill that he thinks we need? Say for instance, the dental industry. Now, I'm going to pick on the dental industry, but I'm not picking on them really. I'm just using them as an example because I need some dental work, so I don't want to be too hard on them. But let's say the dental industry. Let's say there's a bill and all of a sudden it shows up and it's concerning the dental industry that we want to make it where you have to get your teeth cleaned every 6 months because you know what? Studies have shown that if you don't get your teeth professionally cleaned every 6 months, your teeth are going to fall out. Now, would a senator just sit there and dream that up? It's not likely. Usually what happens is there is a special interest, as we might call them, or a group that represents a particular industry, and that group presses legislation which is beneficial to their industry. Say, for instance, the dental industry. If they, say, for instance, gave me money, say I was going to run for the House of Representatives, say they gave me some money, $50,000. It's not unheard of anymore for a representative to spend $100,000 in a campaign. I don't know if you knew that, but in one that's really hotly contested. But suppose the dental industry or whoever gives me $50,000 for my campaign. And no strings attached, Mr. Lewis. We just think you're a good conservative man. You're going to be good for our state. The people like you. We want you to be the man. So then let's assume that I get elected. I'm elected there and I'm sitting in my office and I'm thinking, well, there's not so much going on with being a representative. It's not a big deal at all. All of a sudden I get a knock on my door. It's from who? It's from the dental industry. It's from lobbyists that are paid by these folks to protect their industry, not only to protect it, but also to promote it. And so when they come in and they say, hey, we really need this bill, you know, about getting your teeth cleaned, because people who don't get their teeth cleaned, you know, it's bad news for everybody. So they're wanting me to introduce this bill, and they expect me to because they supported me. And if I don't, then maybe the next time they won't give me that money that I need for my re-election bid. So I'm going to have to get a drink of my Coke here. So understand that when you see a bill and when you read a bill, that in many cases is really what's behind the legislation. Not in every case, but it is a lot of times because of a special interest that wants something passed, that wants something introduced that will benefit their own industry. But you have to keep in mind that a lot of times these industry people, they're only interested in their one specific group. Okay? I mean, say for instance, in this dental bill that I'm talking about here, it may be good for the dental industry because most people are just going to go ahead and pay the money and get their teeth cleaned every time, so in the end, dentists are going to make more money. But they don't realize it might affect people like me that at certain times in my life have been so poor that I couldn't go to the dentist. And if I went to the dentist and the dentist said, well, you have to have a cleaning when you get here, whether you want it or not, well, I may just skip it altogether. So sometimes, I'm just talking hypothetically here, I wouldn't really do that. But sometimes we don't realize that these lobbyists, these bills may seem good on the surface, but then they hurt other people. They hurt other segments of society. And so therefore it can sometimes be a bad thing. So just to say it, to kind of sum this up, when you look at a bill, just realize that it's not always there just because some senator thought it up. It's usually because somebody has come to him and somebody has asked for that particular bill. And when you look at it, you should ask, who's going to benefit from this bill? And you should ask, secondly, who's it going to penalize? Because we all know that when if somebody makes money, somebody's going to lose money over here. If the government is pulling money from one area and giving it to this group over here, it's making somebody else suffer. So I think we have to get at the heart of those bills so we can really understand what's going on. Additions?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Nothing at all? All right, I'm just trying to, kind of lay some groundwork. I'm not going to do this kind of thing every time we get together, but I want to make people aware of that. I believe that really and truly, voters don't drive legislation at all in our current world that we live in today, in our society that we live in today. Voters do not drive legislation. Special interest drives legislation. Yes, ma'am.
I want to something. When Nathan Dawn was here last year, he mentioned that most of these bills, you've heard how people complain because the senators and representatives won't read the bills. He said most of those bills aren't even read by the authors. They typically don't even write them. They're written up by the special interest. They take them to the representatives and senators and ask them to push it. So they don't even write a lot of it. Don't even read a lot of it.
Yeah.
Even though they put their name on it.
Right, yeah. I think that's something that we really need to insist from our legislators
I remember that
in
was
the state.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I remember that was a brag point of Dom's, is that he read them all.
Yeah.
He read them all.
People were trying to get a hold of him. He says, I'm busy. I'm reading.
Yeah, I mean, I would think that, if representatives and senators put certain things in place that they won't vote on a bill before they fully read it, that we could probably avoid a lot of the problems. We need to have time to think about the implications of what a bill might do.
Slow down progress. It might be a really good thing.
It might be, yeah. It might be. Okay. But understand, of course, special interest, that doesn't mean it's always a bad thing. When people get together and they promote their ideas of government, that is essentially a special interest. Like, for instance, gun right advocates. When they, they get together, they try to pull their resources together through maybe donations or, talking with legislators or whatever it may be. That's a special interest. And so is every other thing that we are interested in as government. But hopefully, our special interest does not hurt anybody else's interest that they have in the free society that we are supposed to be living in. If what I'm doing levels the playing field for everybody, I don't see how anybody could really be against that. I mean, if we just say, okay, let's level the playing field for everybody, nobody gets nobody gets an advantage over somebody else. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing. Yeah, is people have grown accustomed to using politics to improve themselves or to improve their industry, sometimes to the destruction or to hurting another industry at the same time. And at least I don't think that's what the free market and living in a truly free society is all about.
We also had to do the proper definition of what a level playing field is. It was the Free Air Act. It had to do with radio waves, and they were trying to push a bill that was going to make it to where as much conservative time that you're going to have on the radio, you have to have an equal amount of liberal time.
Oh, yeah.
And what it really meant was they were trying to push the conservative radio stations to put liberal stuff on theirs because the liberal people couldn't get anybody to listen to them.
Exactly, I remember
on their
that.
station.
I do remember that.
So level playing field has to be defined as well.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't, and creating a level playing field, of course, does not mean government intervention. We don't go in there and say, well, we want to try to lift this guy up or we want to try to push this guy down. That's not what we mean. We just simply mean we don't make deals with an industry, a deal with an industry here to give them tax break or this, but, then that's going to make them rich and somebody else poor. That's not really the way to do it, I don't think. Yes?
I think you're making real valid points, and I may be changing the subject here when I actually say this, but do you think that term limits will help solve some of these issues that the lobbyists have pushed into the...
You mean on the state level?
Yeah.
Well, of course, on the state level, there already are term limits.
There is term limits, but I'm just talking about Well, all across the board, United States government,
Uh-huh.
and Washington D.C.
Really and truly, I don't think, I'm not wholly opposed to term limits myself, but I really, at the same time, I wonder if that would actually help. Because it seems like, especially on the federal level, people get sucked into that system, and like I said, as far as I'm concerned, special interest is what's driving legislation. So we could re-elect new people every 12 years, but give them a couple of years of being in there, and it seems like they're wrapped up in the same. I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but it just seems to happen.
Education is the best means.
Yeah, and so ultimately education has to be the way for people to get involved in their government. If we want to make serious changes, people are going to have to get involved.
I've had a lobbyist, and when we met in D.C., I didn't go meet our elected officials because they weren't the movers and the shakers. It was their assistants, it was their staff, but very, very little face time. And actually, the elected officials report series of whatever you have to say. So when you elect somebody and think you're making a difference, I'm here to tell you that's not always. Well, Breitenstein just wrote an excellent article on how the new crew that has gone up to Washington and what happens to them. I mean, they get B-rated day one.
Oh,
It
right.
starts day one. You will toe the line. That's not the other elected folks. That's all these people who run Washington that you don't see. They never show up on the ballot. So
It's a big mess, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's absolutely a mess. And we have to understand all of those things as we look at legislation as to why would this ever be introduced. Sometimes that's the case.
I got one comment. The level playing field, man, that's hard to achieve. You see one thing, nothing's fair.
Nothing is fair. Right.
I mean, you participate where you can, and if you want to do more, it's going to be a lot of sacrifice and work on your part.
Oh yeah, as far as on a personal level.
Well, I mean-
Yeah, what I'm simply saying as far as the government creating a level playing field, that's a lot of times that used to be kind of a liberal buzzword, I suppose. But the idea that I mean by that is that government is supposed to step out of the way and not prefer one group over another. Yeah, that's what I mean by that. Yeah, they're not supposed to go out there and, like I said, push one group down and raise another group up artificially in order to create some kind of free market. If you just leave the free market to itself, again, that's what I mean by level playing field. Leave the free market to itself, then it'll play out like it's supposed to. Right. Yeah, equal opportunity, exactly.
What I always thought during the GM bailout, for instance, think about how Florida felt about that.
Oh, yeah.
Here they are being taxed, and their tax money is being taken from them and propping up GM for their core business practices. And I'm driving a Chevy.
Yeah, exactly, man. It doesn't make a lot of sense, does it?
You're speaking about term limits, I think 12 years is too long.
Yeah, 12 years, yeah. I know, it doesn't take long, does it? And they're a full part of the system. All right, let's move on because we have a couple of bills that we want to look at tonight. I've encouraged the people with smartphones, and I always debate whether a smartphone is actually smart or not. But anyway, if you have that, you can go to either okhouse.gov or oksenate.gov, and you can research any of the Oklahoma legislation that you want. I'd encourage you, if you have your smartphone, go to okhouse.gov, and we won't accuse you of playing on your phone during class. So, any one of these, Max? I didn't give you one. I've got one right here. I think. Yeah. So either way, you can go to that. And the first bill, if you scroll down on your smartphone, you'll find a place on there where it says, like, search legislation, and you can enter HB 1379. HB means House Bill. 1379. If it said SB, that would be a Senate bill. And by the way, I think you can type in SB in the search box of either one of these, and it'll still pull up the legislation. And you can just link it back and forth. But what I want to do, if you do not have your phone with you, I have here a copy of what we're going to look at in the legislation, and I just want to go through this very quickly because I want people to understand how they can research bills. This is actually how you can get in there, you can study it, and you can decide for yourself if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. Let's say, for instance, you read in the newspaper that House Bill 1379 is a bill that is going to preserve, it's called here in fact, the Protection of Human Life Act of 2015. That it in some way is going to preserve the embryonic, non-therapeutic research. It's going to keep that from happening. In other words, it's a law, a new law that's going to keep that from happening. So let's say you read that in the newspaper, you want to find out more about it. All you have to do is type in that House bill, and what it's going to bring up when you type it is going to bring up here like just an overview of the bill. That's what this first page is on. It's going to give you, like for instance, the bill number, and then right out next to it, it says Fisher. That's the author of the bill. Remember I said every bill has an author, so it's going to give you the author, and then next to that, if it has a Senate author, that'll be listed out next to that. So this bill is telling us that it was authored by Fisher, and it has, I don't even know how to pronounce that guy's name. Burkeen of the Senate. That means it has an author in both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Then you can look here and you will see basically just a very general overview of what's going on. It says that this bill is about the Public Health and Safety, creating the Protection of Human Life Act of 2015. That's very basic, but that's a summary of what the bill is doing. Then you'll notice you have a series of tabs going across, and the one that it defaults to is the History tab. And if you look down at the history of this bill, you can see what's happened to it as it's progressed through the chambers. Like for instance, on February 2nd, it was authored by Representative Fisher. I assume that's when he submitted it. On the 3rd, it said it got its second reading, and it was assigned to the Public Health Committee. If you study legislation at all, you know that usually what happens is when they author a bill, they assign it to a subcommittee or a committee that looks like, say, 9 guys or 9 people look at this bill, they debate it, they study it, and then they vote on it to whether they decide if it's going to go on for a full House vote. And that's exactly what we have here on the 3rd day of, the 3rd day of February. It says it was referred to Public Health. That means it was referred to that committee. The next line says CR, that is committee report. They do pass the Public Health Committee. What that means is they looked at it in committee, they debated it in committee, and they passed it. It means that it's now eligible to go on, if you will. I don't know if eligible is the right word, but to go on and actually receive a floor vote. Now, if you want to, what you can do is you can click on, right here, where it says HB 1379, you can click on that, and that'll give you the text of the bill. Or you can click on, I believe, versions, that versions tab, and then click down there, and it'll also give you a copy of the bill. But the bill that I have put in your handout here is the one that's called the floor version. Now, let me just say this real quick before we look at the text itself. You have to be careful when you're looking at legislation, because sometimes the bill as it was introduced is drastically different than when it finally reaches the floor and when they finally vote on it. I was tricked last year, early on when I started studying this stuff. I looked at a bill as it was introduced, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is great. And then I read about it later on, that bill passed. All right, great, great, great. But then I went and looked in the text, and as it went through the committee process, the language that I wanted in there was completely struck. So just because it's one way in the introduced version does not mean it's going to be that way at the end. You have to look at these, and if you, like I said, if you look at the history of it, you can see that there was an introduced version, but then later on, there was what we, well, it's not on that particular one, but if you go further into your packet there, beyond the bill, you'll see a committee report which talks about a substitute, and that basically means they modified the bill. They modified it, they changed it, it's different when it finally gets to the floor. All right, so...
Well, your front sheet does say it's been authored by 3 others and then with...
Co-authored.
then withdrawn and referred again to the committee and then passed again by the committee.
Oh, committee substitute. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. is the committee substitute. That means that the committee has written something a little different than the original language as the bill was introduced, and so you have to be cognizant of that. Let's go over to the bill itself, which is the second page. As I said, you read this particular section here, and this is kind of a summary of the bill itself. It says, an act relating to public health and safety, creating the Protection of Human Life Act of 2015, defining the terms, making certain actions with a human embryo unlawful, providing a penalty, and providing for codification, and so on and so forth. So this bill here is going to be about human embryo, non-therapeutic human embryo research, basically is what it's going to be about. Now, I understand that, I don't know everybody's view in here regarding abortion, and certainly in regards to human embryo research and that kind of thing, and the point was really not so much to defend abortion or to condemn abortion per se in tonight, but this is more than anything a good bill for you to see how it progresses and and how the process works. So go over to the next page. Let's see here. Go over to the next page. Section 2 is where the actual legislation begins. It says it's a new law. You know, of course, that some laws are amendatory and some laws are new law. Or some bills are amendatory and some bills are new. When it says a new law, that means it's brand new. Everything in this bill is brand new. When it says new, I think it says it 2 or 3 times in here, at least twice. When it says it's a new law, it's never been on the books before. However, if it says amendatory right before the text begins, you know that that's an old law that they're simply either adding something to, taking something away, maybe it's outdated, that kind of thing. But this is a brand new law. It says right at the very top that this is a new section of the law to be codified. And then in section A, you'll notice it begins to define the terms, like what a human embryo is. If you want to read that, you can. But the main thing I wanted to read is point number 2, non-therapeutic research. Because the bill is saying that it's going to forbid non-therapeutic research of human embryos. So what exactly does that mean? They define it. Non-therapeutic research means research that is not intended to help preserve the life and health of the particular embryo subjected to the risk. That is, if somebody is going to do research on a human embryo, that research must in some way preserve the life of it or the health of it. It can't destroy the human embryo. It can't end its life. It can't, somehow harm it in any way. Is I think the essence of what's going on here. And then you will see, going on down to line number 15, it actually gives you the law itself. No person shall knowingly conduct non-therapeutic research that is designed to destroy a human embryo or subjects a human embryo to substantial risk of injury or death. That's the essence of it. Point 2 and 3 are different variations, or not variations, but other things that become illegal, but that's the essence of what the bill is about. Then turn the page, and you'll find, point C, you'll find the penalty. Can I ask somebody to do something for me? The handout that I've given you is the floor version. If somebody could look up on their computer the version as introduced.
The $19,000 is the penalty.
Oh, you already found that, huh? All right then, good. Let's read the penalty here. This is the floor version. It says, any person found violating the provisions of subsection B of this section shall, upon conviction, be guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by incarceration in the county jail for a term not to exceed 1 year. In other words, if you perform this stuff on human embryos and you get busted for it, you can spend up to a year in the county jail. However, this is where, as I said, you have to be careful between the introduced and the final version, because what did it say, Boomer?
Sorry, I just closed it. It's about $19,000 is what the average it takes to house someone for 1 year. And then I saw something that said $100,000, but I was skimming.
Right. Well, my 4 hours and 39 minutes just ended on my computer. So much for that battery life. If somebody will look it up, we don't actually have to read it for the sake of time, but if you look at the introduced version versus what we just read on the punishable part here, in the original version, number one, it was a felony, not a misdemeanor. And number two, the fine was, I believe, not $100,000, and it was, I believe, between 1 year and life in prison. I could be wrong on that.
1 year, no more than life, and a fine not less than $100,000.
Right. So
Drastic change there, isn't it?
that is a drastic change. So now I did not take the time to look at the video or the audio on this particular bill, but if you go to this summary page of any particular bill, and then you go over to and you click on, wrong side, you click on video, you will either be able to see video or audio. It's not always video. You'll be able to listen to the debates, and probably you would be able to find out why that change was made. Maybe somebody said, hey, that's just too much. If you make it a misdemeanor, I'll vote for it. Or if you take out that fine, I'll vote for it. You know how politics works. So the floor version ended up differently than the introduced version. And so anyone want to throw in their 2 cents on human embryonic research?
You know what came to my mind, John, was I know we've all heard this, that they did in England where they had this child has 3 parents. You know, they took
it's a separate woman for the egg and a separate woman for the
yeah.
place.
And I'm wondering if this is partly to prevent things like that from happening.
Yeah, very well could be. Very well could be. I didn't research all the ins and outs of why the bill was asked for and what's behind it and everything. I personally am interested in preserving human life, even in the embryonic state. I shouldn't have chosen this bill. I know about that word. But you can see from this particular bill that it does apparently have a lot of support. I was going to point out one more thing about it. If you look at a bill, that history page there, when you first type it up, and you, for one, say for instance, you don't see anybody on the other side that's become an author. Say it's a House bill and you don't see a senator that has become a co-author, an author in the Senate. You might not have a strong bill there. Because, as we know, it has to pass both houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, then move on to be signed by the governor. So if you only have a bill over in the House and you don't have a senator over here saying, I'm with you, then it's not really going to go anywhere. And another thing, you can also tell how well a bill is performing by what's going on here. For instance, if you see a bill that was assigned to a committee, and then it's 2 months later and nothing has happened, there's nothing else, they haven't read it, they haven't talked about it, your chances are going down of that particular bill making it through and actually becoming law. So you can look at these bills and you can see the progress and you can see just how much strength they have. In this particular case, if you look at this page on the House of Representatives, the committee report, you'll see that they voted in this particular report 6-3 to go ahead and pass this on to a full floor vote. Doesn't mean necessarily it'll come up to a floor vote, but they did pass it in the committee 6-3. If you look at the names of the people on here, you'll see that it was pretty much straight line. Republicans voted for it, Democrats voted against it. Now there was only 3 that voted against it, but one of them was a Republican, Mr. Cox. I think he might be over the Eufaula area. I could be wrong, but I would guess there are probably some people in Eufaula that probably would want this bill to pass. And if that's the case, then I believe the folks in that area, really with any of them, would have a right to petition these individuals and say, hey, what's going on here, We don't want this to be. All right,
So it was a party line vote from the committee, is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, all the yeas were Republicans, if I counted them right, and the nays were Democrats, except for Mr. Cox was a Republican. So, at any rate, though, that's where we get on that. All right, anything more on this particular bill?
Well, on the process, you're talking about how one usually dies. It's not getting talked about or pushed around by everyone. So is that where special interests send their lobbies down, and if they really want one to go, they're going to have to put a lot of footwork and get into everybody's office and make sure they're looking at this bill, right?
That's the name of the game, yeah. And that's what they do. They not only petition, say, the person that's going to author the bill, say my dental bill here that they're going to try to get me to write, but then, assuming that I was going to write this bill, author this bill, then they're going to start working on all the other ones. You know, hey, we really need this bill. Yeah, they're really going to, and that's how a lot of times, like I said, legislation is driven by special interests. The more people that call and talk to them about the bills, the more likely we are to get what we want. That's how.
Say then some special interest groups have more power than others if some of these bills easily die like that.
Yeah, really they do. You know, a lot of and that's the thing, I guess. People that want just to get the government out of everybody's business, economically speaking, it's hard for them to have a special interest, you know, that's working on behalf of them with full-time lobbyists, because there's nothing in it for anybody, right? There's nothing in it. I mean, the dental industry over here, they've got their man because they want to protect their industry. But if we all just said, well, let's get government out of everything, then that just wouldn't work for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's
people with the advantage want to keep it. Exactly.
Well, it is. It's exactly right. So we have to always keep that in mind. Okay, let's move right along into our next bill. Then we've got about 25 minutes to go. I want to look at now. Again, you can use your smartphone here. You can look on this. I want to look at House Bill 1082, and this has to do with the selling the low tread tires. There was a little bit of controversy about this in the past, in the past week or so. And if you look at this particular bill, I want to just give you the overview of what happened in the House first before we talk about the particulars of it. If you look at this particular bill, what has happened with it is that it was assigned to the committee. Of course, it was authored by Mr. Owenby, and it was assigned to the Public Safety Committee. And if you listen to the audio and this kind of thing, they debated it, they changed it a little bit, and then you come on down here where it says third reading. That means it came up in the House on the floor of the House, and the yeas were 46, the nays were 48. In other words, it failed. The bill didn't pass. It passed committee, but it didn't pass a floor House vote. A notice was served to reconsider by Representative Owenby, but it never came back up. And so, as far as I can tell, that means that the bill has died. It's been voted down. Now, someone might ask, well, why would we want to look at this bill then? You know, if the bill has already been defeated, why would we want to look at it? Well, a couple of reasons. One, because it very likely might come up again. If anybody thinks that, or you shouldn't think, I should say, that just because a bill dies now, and I think everybody in this room understands this, just because a bill dies now doesn't mean it's not going to pop back up somewhere else, maybe another author, maybe at another time, maybe not disguised, I don't want to use that word, maybe in a different way, but yet it may come back up. Okay, so that's one reason to look at it. And secondly, because I just want to be honest with everybody here, I believe that this piece of legislation is just about the best example of a bad bill that I could find. Honestly, I mean, it really is. When you begin to think about, this is what I said, when somebody asks for a bill, you have to think about, why would we want this in our state? And who is it going to hurt, and who is it going to help? And I think when you look at that from an economic point of view and from a personal, social point of view, if you will, that there's just there's just no need for a bill like this. And in fact, I believe it is actually or will be harmful to our society. So that's why I believe it's important for us to understand this, is because even if it's not low tread on tires, it could be something else. It could be these dentists saying that we need to clean your teeth every year, or whatever it is. And we don't realize sometimes those things can actually hurt a segment of our population, and so we need to be real careful about introducing the bills. Let's look at here first of all this particular page. It's the second to the last page that you have on House Bill 1082. Let me explain a little bit about the bill, and if you have any any reasons why you think it's a good bill, or why you think it's a bad bill, or what should be done about it, absolutely we want to hear what you have to say. This is another example, though, of where the as introduced is completely different than the final floor version. Initially, and by the way, the part that's underlined is the only thing that is new about this legislation. This is one of those amendatory bills, and so everything that's not underlined is already law. And the underlined part is the part that they're wanting to add to that law. Okay? So when we read the as introduced portion, we find out that this original bill says that no person or any person shall sell or offer for sale any unmounted tire that has a tread depth less than 2/32 of an inch, or that is in unsafe operating condition as described herein. However, when you look at the final floor version, you will find out that it says, nor shall any person sell or offer for sale any tire to the consumer for use on a public roadway that has a tread depth less than 2/32 of an inch, or that is in unsafe operating condition as described herein. So do you see the difference between the two? Initially, when Representative Allenby introduced the bill, he introduced it, if you read it, it basically says, and I talked to him about this by way of email, it said he understands that the bill initially was going to make literally selling any tire under this tread depth to anybody for any reason illegal. That's what the original bill would have done. He said, however, it's likely that it will be tossed around in the committee and we'll come up with something different. This is what they came up with. And that is that it would only be for a consumer that was going to use it on the public roadway with this particular tread depth. And so if a person wanted to buy it for, say, their boat dock, that'd be okay. They want to buy it, they want to build a house out of tires, they can do it, They won't be subject to this particular law. But something that I really find interesting and that I really think people should think about is, why would somebody introduce a bill like this if they expect that it's going to eventually wind up like this? What if this bill just passed? It just went all the way through and passed. For me, anyway, I couldn't introduce legislation where, as it stands, couldn't go and pass and become the law of the land. If I wrote legislation that's too restrictive, which I think most everybody agrees with that this one is, if I wrote legislation that's too restrictive, expecting that somehow all that's going to be whittled down and taken away so that everybody can get their say, that sounds like a dangerous thing to do to me. I think you ought to write legislation, just an opinion, you ought to write legislation how you'd want it to be passed. And I know there is, and I'm not saying it happened in this case. I want everybody to know that. I'm not saying it happened in this case, but there is the psychological idea that if you shoot for the stars, you might get the moon. And I think the same way in this case here. People are not in this case, but in some cases, where there's a psychological thing that if we allow each person to have their own little say in this bill, then we're much more likely to get it passed. So if I ask for way more than I want, Nick over here said, well, I don't like this part, and so he gets to cross out a place. And then Marcia, she doesn't like it, so she gets to cross out a place. We all are happy that way, and we all get to vote on it. We're all on board with it. That way everybody gets to feel like they're a part of it. But I think you ought to write legislation like you want it passed.
I got a lot to say about this.
Yes.
Okay, first off, I believe we had voted on something to do with this before. Maybe the last presidential or something, but I do recall.
We can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I think that we had voted on something like this before, several years ago, something very similar. So that's something that just popped into my head. Now, secondly, the bill itself already exists as law for commercial motor vehicles. You cannot operate one with less than that. So maybe, and I'm speculating, the idea was to impose on everyone the same unfair regulation that is imposed on the trucking industry. And it's in the name of safety, of course. And my third thing is this, kind of unrelated. For me, the hands-free with the truckers. You see the truckers with the, boy, they can get, that's a $12,000 fine to the company, or maybe more, and to them it's several thousand personally. If they're talking on that cell phone. Okay, so now you got to have the microphone. And that's my opinion, because I am a CDLA holder, that the non-commercial drivers are the ones causing the problems with the telephones, not the actual truck drivers. Usually the truck drivers are much more safe, and especially if they're using the microphone where they don't have to have their hand on it.
If they have to have that on, yeah.
But that's my point.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with the fact that they probably are safer. You know, they have to be. It's their job.
Oh yeah. You got to be twice, 3 times as alert.
Right.
You know, for what's going around you than
Stopping
you do just
distance,
driving in the car.
Yeah, all that exactly.
These tires are already illegal to operate on the highway
Yes, they are.
That's for everybody.
for commercial or private.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's 230 seconds, less than 230 seconds already illegal.
Well, I didn't know it was still illegal for regular cars.
Yes, actually, we were going to say something.
My question is, even though it may be illegal, one thing, and I'm going to tell you that, I know David was there, and maybe 3 or 4 other people, but they had Friday's luncheon where Pat taught and visited about this bill. I would think, boy, I'd love to see everybody that's here come to that meeting also.
We'd love to see the legislators here too.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, there's a need to open that up. And I think
They could come down.
and you know, I think Tuesdays are probably a challenge for them to be here Monday. I think if
Monday.
they did it on a Thursday night where they have a chance, opportunity to come back in here, that may be something to consider later. But also, they did away with inspections on vehicles a few years ago, and as a result of this was his defense. And I'm not defending here. I'm just saying I appreciate. I think David would too appreciate what John is saying. I do, because I see both sides, and I see some issues that you certainly are addressing that I would want to address the fact, you know. And I think everyone here would do that. But he did have some defense to what you are saying for. So we get the benefit of seeing both sides. Is that not right, David? I mean, and I totally agree with you, John.
And
The point being, it's
newspaper-
already illegal. Why are we writing a bill for it? Is that right?
Well, no. And here's the thing. My thing on this is that it is true. It is already illegal for you or I to operate our car out there on the road with tires that are less than 30 seconds of an inch. It's illegal. It says so in this particular bill. However, what this bill essentially is doing is shifting the burden of proof upon the small business owner, the guy down here in the corner of Washington and 12th that I know. It's shifting the burden to now make them prove that they have not sold a tire to people that's under a certain tread depth. And so basically, in my opinion, you are drastically increasing the paperwork that's going to go along with these businesses. These poor guys that are supplying the needs of these very low tread depth tires, they're not making a killing. I think you've seen these shops around. And to ask them to now be liable is not really what freedom and liberty is all about. I mean, for instance, I try to think of a parallel and see if you think this is parallel at all. It's already illegal to use fireworks in town. I think every probably pretty much incorporated city is that way. You can't use fireworks. But now suppose we write a bill, because lots of people in town are burning down houses. Let's write a bill that now makes fireworks stands document that they're not selling fireworks to people that are going to take them in town and shoot them off. That wouldn't be a good thing, would it? I don't think it would be a good thing. Huh?
It'd be impossible.
It would be impossible, of course it would. But the idea of if we're going to make them liable, if we make this law and now we're going to make you guys liable because you let those guys take this into town, they're going to have to be able to document, no, our worker did thus and thus, and explain to them that they couldn't use this. Believe me, it's going to create more paperwork. It always does.
Maybe a clarification on that, it actually is not impossible. It can be done. It would be painfully cumbersome and moronic.
It would be.
This is. It's
It
not
would.
impossible.
It would be. It would be totally.
I'm sorry, we're not going to use that word. That's not very political.
Okay.
And there's not been a lot of accidents because of this. So why are we authoring this bill? Where's
Well,
it
another
coming
thing,
from?
if I sold you a tire tomorrow and I had a I mean, you came to me and I sold you one, and I guaranteed it to be 230 seconds. As soon as you drive away on it, not
Yeah.
long, it's less.
Right.
And many of us have asked him point blank who authored the bill, and he refuses to answer.
Okay, so let's go on with this a little bit. We've only got about 10 minutes left, and I want to talk about real quick.
Don't worry, our plan is to make you go over to make you look bad.
Yeah. A couple of the main points of why I believe this is a bad bill. First of all, because it disrupts the free market. It unnecessarily disrupts the free market. We all understand that when you take, there's a certain amount of demand and a certain supply. We understand the supply and demand, that when the demand for something goes up, the price is going to go up, right? If the demand goes down, the price is going to go down. If we have a shortage of whatever it is we're trying to sell, say for instance there was a big freeze in Florida for their oranges, oranges might go up because people still want them, but they can't get them as easily, so the price goes up. And so we have to understand that when we do this, we will essentially be pulling a certain number of tires out of the market. If this bill ever becomes law, we will be pulling those tires out of the market. And when we pull a certain number of tires out of the market, what happens? The prices are naturally going to go up. It's just a basic concept of supply and demand. You take a certain number out, the prices are going to go up. And so I think if we say, well, this bill is for the poor, for the people that don't make much, then if we take these tires out of the market and the prices of tires overall goes up, then that's going to make it harder for the poor person to afford the tires.
Especially when the cheap ones they were buying aren't there anymore.
That's right. Exactly. And to me, that really makes it a no-go just from an economic point of view, because it's disrupting the free market. Which brings up the second reason, and I believe that this... I'll go ahead and let you...
John, do you think that you as a supplier or a small guy down on 12th in Washington should be allowed to sell that tire to me, a woman who comes in and says, I need a tire?
Well, okay,
Do
let
you
me...
think they should? I mean, I'm not pro or con that. I'm just throwing it out
You got the option to tell if you want a new tire or a used
Absolutely.
tire.
Well, and that's the point I was going to make up on... not make up. I hope I'm not making it up as
Cheap and dangerous, too.
yeah.
I'll take one that just holds air, please.
Yeah, just holds there. This is what I wanted to talk about, is the social impact of this particular bill. And I would simply say to that, some people need these tires, honestly. I have been in the income bracket before where I was so poor that if I had to buy an expensive tire, I wouldn't be able to. I have had to literally go and buy a cheap tire just sometimes to keep it rolling. I mean, nobody wants to drive on a tire that has a steel belt shown. I don't know anybody that would want to do that. Not even low-income people want to do that. However, if, say for instance, you can get a low-income tire or low tread tire for $25 as opposed to, say, $50, then you might be able to make that $25 if you're really hurting. But, you might not be able to if you're being forced into buying tires that are more expensive than you can afford. Now, I can assure you there are people out there that don't make it to work or won't make it to work because they won't be able to afford the tires. You know, and that brings up something else, and that is that if we do make a law like this, it actually is going to encourage the low-income people to drive longer on the tires that they already have and that are already bad. Think about it. If I could buy a $25 tire, and if I got steel belt showing here on my tire, and I can go over here and buy a $25 one, well, I might do that. But if they take those tires out, now all I can do is get a $50 tire. I'm going to drive that thing until it pops. If it's a choice between going to work or not, or getting my kids what they need or not, you're going to do it. Yes, Bill.
I still, I'm sort of coming back to yours here. You're driving down the road 70 miles an hour, and that blows, and you hit a family of 5 going that way. What's the consequences of you killing 5 people?
Well, I do understand that there is that possibility, but there's that possibility with any used tire. And to what Dolores was saying was,
brand new.
Yeah, a brand new tire.
Yeah.
And I've looked for statistics. It's just not happening.
Yes, ma'am.
I think one of the other things that, and as a female, and I don't, you guys can say whatever, there are people out there who take advantage because
There are.
they do not think that you know. So what I'm saying is, I may think I'm buying a car that says, like I said, 537, but yet they put a 237 on it.
Well, I mean, that would have nothing to do.
This law is not going to help that.
Worked on, and not just tires. You can be ripped off on millions.
Oh, yeah,
We need a law for all of them.
I can tell you a very important people who get down the street, but anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, those things happen.
But, yeah,
And I think they should be, so I go home and my son says, Mom, where did you get this car at? I think there should be a legal recourse.
This has been.
Well, there really is. I mean, that's what a civil suit is about. I mean, if they sold you a 532nd or a 232nd tire and said it was 532nd, this law, I mean, they lied to you. This law is not really going to help it so much, I don't think. But kind of what was said, we can be taken advantage of in a lot of different ways, and we cannot legislate every bad thing that everybody could do. Otherwise, there would be so many laws we couldn't live.
Everything has advantage. Taking advantage can be in both directions, and I was thinking of the term charity, which means love. And we have the ability to actually hurt our own charity system by doing this.
Yeah.
I had a girl, I consider a niece, I think she's wonderful, and I sent her down to a agency, I won't name this because we're not supposed to name it yet, but I love them. And she comes in, she needs a tire, she needs a flat fix, and it turns out the tire has a sidewall thing, and they said, by law, we can't touch that, it's terrible, I'm sorry, that's got to be replaced. And she's going, I don't have money. They called me, and I said, I don't care what it takes in this case, please put it on my bill. And one of the guys outside said, hey, for that little Prius, we've got this used tire that's got plenty of life still on it. And they ended up charging her for a flat and replaced her tire with the used one. She walked out, I think, on $8 with a new tire for her. I kind of can't help but wonder what grace could they have given her? What charity could they have given her if we kept on reducing? Finally, they're not allowed to do stuff like that. Yeah,
It's
so
their
there is
business.
a twist in both directions.
If they go around cheating women on their tires, people aren't going to go to them.
Yeah.
They're part of the community.
Let's let Todd's had his hand up. Let's let him talk.
I wonder if I sold her a legal tire and better requirement. She let her son or safety have somewhere. If he goes kills out, we're going to get the inspections, I guess, for it's making me oversee this. I get sued, I guess.
Get sued
Yeah.
if you were the one that sold the tire?
Yeah, but safety that car, mine that burned out.
It was legal when he sold it, and then someone.
It's overseen so much.
It was brought
Oh,
up to
yeah.
the state, they couldn't even prove that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we do this.
David.
Bill, I want to address yours just real quick. If the bill did pass, it's now illegal to sell it. So the situation that John brought up is exactly what would happen. Which would be, I'm driving my vehicle and I'm going to drive it until the tread shows and it just keeps out air. And I'm driving down the road at 70 miles an hour and I have a blowout and I take out a family of 5. how did this bill stop that from happening?
Well, the tire stuff really, it's really, you knew what to do to take the tire, please don't do it.
Because it's already illegal to have that tire at 3/32, so we're left with the same thing. 5 dead people in a lawsuit that somebody who is investigating that accident should be able to come and say, hey, you were running on illegal tires.
Sure.
You're liable.
Back to the bill process.
Last week, 5,000 miles in the tire, just brand new tire.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Down here today. So, I mean, I know it.
I used to have fires.
Yeah.
Okay, we have got basically 2 minutes, so let's let Dolores make a comment, and then we're going to close it up. Would that be okay? Oh, question.
I mean, most of y'all know we're new in the area. We've lived in Louisiana for 45 years and Mississippi. Both those states require inspections. I mean, why does Oklahoma not, or did they used to have it but stopped it?
They did used to have it up till maybe 15 years ago.
I think, like $5, I think the gas station's got to keep making $1 or $2 of it.
Yeah, I don't think it was working too well for them, or something along that line. Do you know?
It didn't help.
Usually what happens when they do that is they say, well, it's only $10 to get your car inspected, but if it doesn't pass, they can charge you up to $150 to get it so it passes, which inclines turning the screw so it idles faster.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes
that's
people have
what
been
happened
accused
with
of
the,
robbing.
Inspection.
I mean,
That's
they
why
can
don't
get in
work
your car and not let you leave.
More people in Texas are getting
It all came down to money, the state wasn't making any money.
Right, exactly. All right, y'all. We're gonna say that's it for this time. The last Monday for now, anyway, in March. I appreciate your time, and I hope you'll come back. Thanks.
Hey,
Why don't you say 2:30 seconds instead of 1:16?
No.
Did I say 116?
No.
No,
Why does it say
why?
2:30 seconds instead of 1:16?
Say 160.
Oh yeah, you know.